Tell your Kevin McAllister story.
I went to an open call audition for Home Alone 3 when I was in third grade because they were recasting the role of Kevin McAllister now that Macaulay Culkin had aged out. In the whole time that we were there was not a kid of color who was sent through that door.
It's so wild.
That and so much more coming right up on today's episode of The Pod Spotter.
You're listening to The Pod Spotter. I'm Zack. There are a shitload of pods out there to weed through, and that is why we are here. We're going to do the heavy lifting. We're going to find the diamonds in the rough. And every Monday, we're going to talk to the creators and the hosts, and we're going to learn about the pods, play clips, and hopefully you find it useful and entertaining, and you subscribe to our little podcast. Visit us at thepodspotter.com and on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at thepodspotter for extra content and information on upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Then you can like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's really a pleasure. I've been screening hundreds of podcasts. You are a piece of crap. You're the reason the country is dividing itself. You represent some of the worst aspects of liberalism. You're condescending. You deserve to be put on an island and die. You're a loser, and I hope you're eaten by a pack of wild dogs. These are typically conversation stoppers, but not if you're Dylan Marron. On his podcast, Conversations with People Who Hate Me, Dylan takes some of the most inflammatory comments lobbed at him on the internet and uses them as a launching off place for two parties to have a more nuanced conversation in an attempt to quell divisiveness in our world, one toxic shitpost at a time. Conversations was selected as a podcast pick by USA Today and The Guardian. It was named the timeliest podcast by Fast Company and won a Webby Award, which honors excellence on the internet. Welcome, Dylan Marron, our answer to the social dilemma. We honor your excellence, and we thank you for sharing your pod with us today. How are you?
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much for having me.
How is your day going so far?
You know what? The honest answer is that the day is going fine. It was like there was a whole plan for right before this interview. And you know when one thing just like sets that off, like one small thing. So everything was perfectly planned. There is a bit of an electrical issue in our building. I was going to be here to let the electrician in. But then the one little snag was that on my way to do laundry, I forgot the detergent. And so, you know, that's like a tight 7 minutes behind schedule. So the day is, now that I'm talking to you, we're getting back on track, and I love it.
Why do you start with that question? Why is that a deliberate choice to humanize sometimes the people that you're talking to a little bit, or is it just, hey, let's breathe?
A lot of my guests have never done a podcast before. They're not in media. So I use it as a way to kind of calm people down, but also to just be like, I want to just hear the super mundane details about your life. Yeah. And it is both to minimize stress, and it's also a disarming tool.
Well, it definitely works. People are coming in, and you're inviting them a bit. There's a bit of that. You're coming to the principal's office energy, or it could be perceived that way. And
it's like, okay, let's sit them both down in the chairs. There's a bowl of candy that's in every guidance counselor's office. And I'm trying to have them talk.
Just to tee it up for people who aren't familiar with Conversations,
please.
Would you describe your podcast as though you're describing it as a podcast at a podcast convention?
Yes. So Conversations with People Who Hate Me takes contentious online conversations and moves them offline to a phone call. It sees negative comments online as the starting point for conversation. And sometimes I speak directly one-on-one to people who have said negative or hateful things to me online. And other times I moderate conversations between two parties who got into it with each other.
It's so wild, everything about today and, living in 2020. Don't read the comments. Don't read the comments. Stay away from the comments. And that's your way.
Do.
You lean right in.
I think the maxim of don't feed the trolls. Now, interestingly, trolls, or maybe not interestingly, you get to decide if it's interesting or not. I don't use the word trolls. I think it's an imprecise word, and I think it's an othering word. And I also just don't think my guests are so different from each other that there's no one word that can be used to describe all of them. But the maxim, don't feed the trolls, don't read the comments, just don't pay attention to that stuff, is it is very well-meaning, but very unrealistic. It was definitely advice that people gave me when I was starting to get hate online, and I just found it impossible to deal with. So I was like, I have to find another coping mechanism other than not reading. I mean, that's the easiest shorthand for people to describe what the podcast is.
I have a director friend who always says of Shakespeare that Shakespeare never wrote about the day Bob went and bought a sandwich. It's it's just about huge things. And and there aren't any softball sort of episodes in your podcast. You tackle the biggest hot button issues, and so that's all just a way of saying content advisory. Listener discretion is advised as we tackle conversations with people who hate me. But I think that we should talk about how you built up the hate bank before conversations, and that was with your online creations. You are a content creator. You have a few series out there that were a source for the, not troll, but the offender bank.
The detractors, the hate, the negativity, yeah.
Let's listen to a little bit from Every Single Word series.
Ron, is that your owl?
Another goal for Slytherin! They lead Gryffindor 90-30. Harry Potter has caught the snitch! Gryffindor wins!
What did we just hear? What was that? What did you create? What is Every Single Word?
Every Single Word is a video series that edits down popular movies to only the words spoken by people of color. And that, I believe, was Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets.
And that was 16 seconds. For those
16 seconds. Yeah. So it's a way to talk about the, representation issues in Hollywood through empirical supercuts, basically. That was the first video series I did that really kind of took off, especially when you're talking about social justice issues. People have a lot to say. People really have opinions about them.
Especially going after those Harry Potter people.
I know.
My goodness.
Although, interestingly, so I have one video that's like the whole Harry Potter series. It's like, I think it's around 8-9 minutes for like all 8 movies. And that's the biggest video on my YouTube. Just because I think people are fascinated, and then some people are like, what are you trying to say? People get combative.
It's sort of like your pod. You don't comment on it too, it's not prescriptive in any way. You're just, here it is.
Right.
Here you
exactly.
go. You decide. And so
I think,
what was some of the stuff that you're hearing back from that series then?
You can be so masked on YouTube with no ties to your kind of personal information. It wasn't until I started making a lot of videos on Facebook that I kind of started getting a lot of hate, but rather than from anonymous accounts, it was from profiles that are tied to, in some cases, every picture ever taken of a person and every post of theirs. Whereas YouTube, YouTube is less of a social platform and more of it's really, I mean, it's a video first platform. And so I think what was the catalyst for conversations with people who hate me was the hate negativity that I was getting on Facebook.
And was unboxing
Unboxing was Facebook, yeah.
Unboxing was Facebook. On unboxing videos, Dylan satirizes the famous unboxing YouTube videos of technology, except he unboxes intangible ideologies. Let's listen to some from Unboxing.
Here's a product as old as the country that made it. Today, I'm unboxing the mistreatment of Native Americans. Hey guys, I'm Dylan Marron, and it's another week, so I'm unboxing another super hot metaphysical product. This one is an antique that dates back to the 1490s. Right when you open it, you will see a globe. And now this is not just any globe, because this one comes with whiteout. Erase already existing and thriving regions so that you can visit them, reclaim them, and then rename them after yourself. All while redefining what the word discover means.
How could that be controversial? What? How could what?
It's actually all very agreed upon stuff. Everyone sees it the same way. It's deeply not controversial. And that's the stuff that was like coming right into my inbox. People were saying things about me directly. In those videos, if I was playing a YouTuber, I was definitely playing a heightened level of myself. And because of context collapse on the internet, that doesn't read at all. Like at all. It's just like people just assume whatever they see of you is 100% of you.
I would forgive it as, oh, he's satirizing unboxers. It's not, you know,
Totally.
the snark is hey guys, I got the new RTX 3080 here, check it out, unbox, you know, that vibe. But I can see where, to your point, somebody coming to it from a different side would say, oh my God, snark, I can't listen to this. And
I don't fault them for that.
The second observation is that thing that you talk about in one of your episodes, where you quote the sort of Ira Glass taste versus ability. And we're basically, when you have your whole life in digital online videos, like we are, researching this pod, I'm watching you grow as an artist. I'm watching you find your voice, and you don't get to conversations without having unboxing.
No, you don't. I didn't know that, like, there are always dark sides and, like pitfalls of success. But the pitfalls with digital success come on immediately. You know, it's not like a negative consequence that catches up to you later. Yeah. It's like you have to experience it both at the same time. Going viral, getting a lot of press for something doesn't mean that it's going to come later. It means that it's coming right now, you know?
Can I just say, I had a commercial running for a while, and it was a Citibank commercial, and someone tweeted, oh, great, just what we need, another vague vanilla Mark Ruffalo. And that leveled me for a week, Dylan. Like, I was out of commission and it's so like innocuous and like fluff and nothing.
But
I can't imagine
it does. But of course it does. I actually don't think those are on different scales. You were about to say, like, I can't imagine how you deal with this, but it's like still to this day, one comment can level me. This podcast has actually not made me bulletproof. I mean, something like that is incredibly hard to deal with because, and I get into this on the podcast too, it's like what we call hate, right? Like a lot of my guests are like, wait a second, I'm happy to be on this show. I just don't hate you. So I don't know why, like this is the not right title. The problem is that with the influx of negativity we're experiencing on the internet, like that tweet you just quoted to me, it's quite literally not hate. It's not literal hate, but it feels like hate, and it will level you for a week. And it's completely understandable that it does because there was no malice you were doing in it. And then it's like, oh, and now like I don't know, it sucks.
It sucks. It always feels very impossible summing up someone's like entire library of 50 some or 200 some episodes in 45 minutes. And so what I've found helpful is to just identify commonalities with the hosts that they've discovered through hosting their podcast, and that is certainly one that you touched on, was that people don't hate you. Almost all of your guests started with, "Let me just say, I didn't mean that thing that I said."
Oh, and always.
Let's dive into the first, just dive into some audio with your this was the pilot.
Let me give you an example. The LGBT community, LGBT, whatever letters they're adding onto it now. There's always been gay people. They've always been fine, getting along fine in life. And You know, I'm a supporter of gay marriage, by the way. But I don't think that they need a whole list of rights. They're people. It's like saying redhead rights or left-handed people rights. It just seems all silly to me. The whole social justice stuff seems silly to me.
All right. I mean, so clearly there is a lot that you and I disagree on.
I know this.
Right? As you know, I'm a piece of shit.
Let me take that back. That back.
So,
you had caught me at a bad time. I didn't mean to call you a piece of shit. I apologize for calling you a piece of shit.
That's okay. I want to lovingly point out you said I caught you at a bad time, but you mean that you saw my videos at a bad time, right?
Well, for the most part, yeah. Me and my wife were going over them yesterday. My wife, by the way, is a big fan of yours.
Oh, wow. Okay, so one fan in the household and one...
I'm surrounded by him.
Okay, well, I'm sorry and you're welcome, depending on how you want to take this.
So, lots done back there. First of all, an apology right off the bat in episode 1 must have been nice. But as you point out, that is not the goal of this episode of this podcast. The goal is just bring two people together, show some human beings.
Exactly. It's kind of always, well, I really am sorry for saying that to you. I'm not sorry for the feeling behind it, right? I still disagree with you. I'm sorry for wording it that way. I'm sorry if I hurt you. But it's almost like this is an inevitability from being on the phone with someone, right? Chris, who you just heard in that episode, could easily call me a piece of shit when he was direct messaging me and didn't really expect that I would ever see it. It's quite another to say that to someone who you're talking about how your day is going so far with on the phone.
I have to say this was voted one of the timeliest podcasts in 2017, which in internet years, that's like 15 years ago. But it is
decades.
Just as timely, with 3 weeks before the election. I'm just so happy to talk to you about this because this is what we freaking need right now. A little discourse, just some conversations. I have to admit that my guilty pleasure right now, in addition to consuming these podcasts, is small town local radio call-in shows where one side is just lobbing insults at it's the best, and it's such a guilty little pleasure, and it's just like
I don't think that should be guilty.
And no, it's not great because it is. I'm looking at it the same way people look at 200 comment Facebook message arguments.
Yeah.
There's no nuance. It's just side versus side. It's Allen in Allentown yelling at Ted in Wyomissing about Trump signs and Biden, and there's no nuance, there's no conversation. But what your podcast is telling us that when humans are actually taking each other in, breathing in each other's experience, there is an edge taken off of it.
The tagline of the show is, remember, there's a human on the other side of the screen. And I think the uncomfortable truth about that is that it goes both ways. It is both a reminder that the person who you are lobbing insults against is a human, and also the person lobbing insults against you is a human being too. And that's a kind of tricky thing to embrace, but it's a crucial one to embrace.
The other thing about that audio I want to just ask you is that, because this happens like 4 or 5 times on your pod, where somebody they approach the acronym of LGBTQIA+. They just, they don't stick the landing at all. And then I hear this joke all the time, like, what is it these days? Or what do they add another letter on?
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that it's usually by people who can simultaneously rattle off like Article 3, Section 4, Amendment 5 of the Constitution, and you took great pains to memorize that.
Right.
But people, as you say, people need to be forgiven. And so what is the best way that you could tell your guests to approach the, is there a good way to approach that acronym and be like, oh, by the way, what is it today? Or what?
You pick the perfect example and the perfect episode to bring it up with, because the interesting thing is that I too am like, okay, here we go with the alphabet soup joke. And then later in the call with Chris, I want to break something down for him about the queer community. And I stumble while I say the acronym. And so that was just like this unintentional, perfect moment where it would be so easy for me, and I have, to be clear, to tweet like, can I curse on this show?
Yeah, I've been doing it constantly.
Okay, great. So just, I don't know, like, it would be so easy to tweet, like, if you can't get the fucking acronym right, like, you're a fucking homophobe, fuck you. And it's like, also, it helps you to be like, oh, well, for people who don't have the privilege of having queer people in their life, it might seem like an intimidating acronym. Also, the social... to socially belong in the world, I'm getting very sociological, philosophical here, but to socially belong in the world, you want to make the jokes that your social group is making. So the joke that I think, not to speak for him, but presumably Chris's social group is making is about the alphabet soup quality of the LGBTQIA plus acronym. And you're going to make that joke too. We all do it. We make jokes that our in-group is making to belong to that in-group.
Do you have any helpful advice for anybody approaching the acronym that doesn't know, isn't up on their current trend? What is the most graceful way you've heard?
What a great question.
Because I have mealy-mouthed it a few times. Like probably on this podcast where I'm like, LGBTQ.
Yeah, I get it. It's difficult. I think it's also like kind of knowing what the words are, because then that helps you like see it more clearly as you say it. But then it like, to me, it's now become a word, LGBTQIA plus. Whereas like, if you were to quiz me, like what comes right after the I, you know, I'd be like, I have to think for a moment and like do it in my head and do the math. My eyes roll in the back of my head and I'm like having a moment. I is intersex.
Intersex.
And asexual.
Or ally, is that also?
That is, so sometimes it's LGBTQIAA+.
Got it.
But the A can be interchanging. And the interesting thing, of course, about the internet is, of course, I could say that, and then a group of very educated advocates and allies could be like, no, you have it wrong.
Yeah.
So, you know, and as a member of that acronym, I could be getting it wrong. So they're just... well,
I didn't mean to make you speak for the entire community, but
I actually
it comes up
do.
so
I meant to tell you. They voted me the spokesperson. I'm the only one. Thank you. And it's really an honor to be able to speak on behalf of so many people.
Thank you. The next big theme that came up for me on your pod is the second episode that you address the theme of hurt people hurting people. And we hear from Josh, the teenager. Let's listen to a little bit from Josh.
How is high school for you?
It was hell.
Really?
And it's still hell right now, even though it's only 2 weeks left.
How have the last 4 years been hell?
When you're different in any shape, form, or way, if you're not the quote-unquote popular girls, popular guys, football players, then you're not well-liked. And I'm a little bit chubbier than a lot of people, and people seem to judge me before they get to know me. People seem to pick and choose who they like based on what you look like rather than who you are, because when you're in high school, it's all about perfection. If you get your clothes from Walmart, you're an outcast. If you don't have the hottest new clothes, you're an outcast. I'm a little bit bigger. I don't like to use the word fat, but I am a little bit bigger than a lot of my classmates, and they seem to judge me before they even got to know me.
Josh is actually the very first person I ever spoke to on the phone in an unrecorded call. And I really regard Josh like a brother. I see a lot of myself in him. I mean, Josh is straight. And so the bullying he's experiencing in high school is different from the bullying I experienced. I remember just not being able, I couldn't wait to get out. I went to a very progressive Quaker school. So it's like the homophobia is very latent, but when you're coming of age in the late 90s, early aughts, it's like, it's all there. And I think there have been a lot of changes recently. But the idea of hurt people is, to me, the most concise way to distill cyclical abuse, that a person who is hurt themselves will then inflict that hurt on other people. I actually had a guest named Doug. He distilled it so beautifully, and it was, the internet provides a very helpful way to put out all the anger at the world you have at the world out on other people. So the internet kind of provides a punching bag of sorts for us to take whatever we're feeling and take it out on random strangers.
As the listener, you're like, oh wow, we so often lash out at things within our social fabric or within our social circles with commonalities that we see in ourselves. Is that right?
I would say this for all of my guests. If someone is willing to come on the podcast and have a conversation like the ones I try to facilitate, like there is a kind of beautiful well of empathy and vulnerability there. And like all of them, you know, Josh is a really good egg, and he was able to for an 18-year-old, you know, like he was able to see that very quickly and articulate it really quickly.
Third big theme, it seemed almost unthinkable to all of your guests that the target of their hate would ever read the thing written about them. Almost to a man or woman, they were surprised that the comment had been seen.
You tagged me in this post. Did you want me to see it?
I honestly didn't think that you would.
Really?
Really. And, you know, I think that was also before I experienced a lot of the same things of being dragged online. And I think that now I would definitely not do something like that.
Not tag me or not post it at all?
I don't think I would post it at all. I think that was an example of me putting some negative energy into the world that was hateful and not appropriate. You know, I do still stand by the sentiment of that idea.
That I represent some of the worst aspects of liberalism?
I think the unboxing videos do.
Okay.
Such a vulnerable piece of audio. Like you definitely, on your part, you hear like a little it's a little shot. It's a little jab.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
A little unresolved.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
That's Matthew. I mean, Matthew's episode that's episode 3, and I wanted to be super clear with the audience that this was not going to be a red versus blue podcast. Matthew and I bet you are identical in the ballot box. Like, we are identical. He is a queer artist. I am a queer artist. He wants to make work about progressive issues. I want to make work about progressive issues. And, you know, this is also a huge component of the internet, which is that sometimes you set your target to be someone who is so similar to you because they do something different from the way you would do it. And again, I'm saying this without judgment against Matthew because I understand it. I understand that the mechanisms are in place to do that. And I also never want to police someone's opinion, right? Like Matthew is entitled to even still think that I represent some of the worst aspects of liberalism. But it's almost like when I get on the phone with any of my guests, I implicitly forget, like inherently once the receiver picks up, the forgiveness is already there because they have picked up the phone.
But I have two thoughts about that. The first is that when you are in grade school or when you're, you know, a little kid and it's that person that you like are always fighting with, it's sort of like a joke amongst the parents, like, oh, they're going to be best friends someday. They're going to fall in love. It's like the person who you have it's because you see something in them. They are an adversary. You know, you actually talked to one of your high school adversaries. And again, there were like so many similarities. It's like, oh, they're going to grow up and either date or be best friends. And my other thought is that, like, also just based on, you know, now what we know about the social dilemma, based on how the algorithm works, we are inundated with information and people's content who we are, you know, predisposed to interact with. That's how the thing is gamed against us. So naturally, we're just forced. We should know that we are sort of identifying things that are within our brand, are within our taste, are within our circle. It's just interesting that.
Yeah.
Have you seen that movie? I keep referencing it. It occurred to me that not everyone has seen this Netflix movie right now, The Social Dilemma.
Social Dilemma? Oh my God, yeah.
Terrifying.
It's terrifying, and I think about that every day.
The episodes in the early days are mostly about your hate, but then later on you've been talking about moderation. You're going to start monitoring other parties' hates. and online interactions, which I want to get into. But first, I do want to play a little Spot the Troll or Spot the Infraction
Detractor.
or Spot the
I just want to tell you, no one likes this term. Like when I try to do this, they're like, okay, what do you want me? You're being PC about online hate. Yeah. So I understand that no one's going to be on board with this.
Right.
Because I'm protective of my guests, I refuse to use that word. But I'll say detractor. You can say whatever you want.
Okay. One round of Spot the Hater Troll Detractor. I'm going to read you 3 reviews, negative reviews of your podcast. This is a foolish game to play with you because you read the comments. I know you read the comments. And sometimes you
Not on
mind them
iTunes. That's
perfect.
overwhelming.
These are 3 from iTunes.
Yikes.
Spot the one I just made up. Answer correctly. And is it Brian Wilson's art? Who made the T-shirt here?
Oh, this is Rob Wilson. Yes.
Rob Wilson,
oh my God!
thank you. Rob
Look
Wilson's
at you.
tea. I know we got our hands on the conversation with people.
Wow.
If you answer this question correctly, the tea is going on the pod wall in perpetuity.
Wow.
Are you ready for Spot the Detractor?
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
I'm
just
read
to
you 3.
clarify,
Yep.
3. 1 is fake.
1 is fake.
That's terrifying that 2 are going to be real, but go for it.
3 reviews. If I wanted to hear 2 people argue for 45 minutes, I would have called my parents. Number 2, smug, condescending while trying to claim a moral high ground. Thanks. The arguments put forth in this podcast are as strong as a toothpick castle. 3 reviews, 1 is fake.
I think the first one is fake.
Damn you. It's too much of a joke. It's obviously written. I don't know what I was thinking.
I know what people identify as the faults with it. So can you read the second one to me again? No one should ever be wanting to live in this, but I'm ready.
Let's dwell.
We got to dwell. I mean, literally, like, this is the conceit of this podcast, so let's dwell.
If anyone was going to be okay with this game, I was pretty sure I was fine playing it with you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. You live in this, smug and condescending while trying to claim a moral high ground. And see, I don't know that you ever try to claim a moral high ground.
I've wanted to produce an episode based on iTunes comments, but there is not a single way to get in touch with the person who wrote it. So that's actually like, if I could draft a memo to Silicon Valley, it's that one of the best antidotes to negativity online is being connected to the human, right? Like, so if the comment is connected to the human, whereas the more anonymous the more anonymous and difficult to reach the person is on that platform. And I understand that iTunes comments are not a social platform, but they are a platform where you can say something and then kind of say it without consequence. So I would love to have a conversation with someone who hates the podcast through the iTunes comments. I just can't.
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, that's no secret. Anonymity breeds hate. I mean, I play video games. That's where you hear it the most.
Completely.
Like, I'm just a voice? Oh, okay.
Totally.
Say whatever I want.
And in a space where you're riled up to be playing a game. So you're already raging.
The second one, did you want to?
We got to revisit. We got to unpack.
Put forth in this podcast are as strong as a toothpick castle. Who's out there just making toothpick castles?
I don't know, but that's beautiful, and I want to see it at MoMA.
House of Cards? I think House of Cards.
But House of Cards or House of Toothpicks. So this is, I think, wow, I don't know why I'm wanting to empathize with all of these people
it's your
who have written
show.
these comments.
This is your show.
So, right. But I'm like, this person is a lovely, amazing angel. And they probably are. Truly, I mean that very sincerely. Sometimes when people come to this show looking for a battle of ideas, they're disappointed because what it is it is a conversation between human beings. And our brains that very much need a game, and when I say our, I'm also including my brain, really want to see a victor and a loser. They, they want to see someone pummel the other person. And so that usually comes with like battling out with ideas, whereas I actually find it most productive to keep the conversation on track is to be like, okay, like, we're not going to necessarily, like, we can get so lost in idea land and argument land and debate land that I'm just going to try and veer us on track to talk more about feelings.
And let me just use this opportunity to take a quick break. We are here to fill the role of looking for great content for you. If you like this show, please check us out and subscribe. Visit thepodspotter.com and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at thepodspotter for lots of good stuff. And please, please, please leave a review and rate and subscribe and judge us on Apple Podcasts and help spread the word. We release every Monday with a review of a wonderful new pod, and we're just going to keep plowing ahead. So please keep listening. If you have suggestions for pods in the future, drop us a note on any of those social media platforms or at thepodspotter.com. Thanks, everybody. This is a weird observation. When you're talking about all the pre-production steps, it was funny to me. I counted maybe almost half of your episodes that have people that were detractors, haters, lobbed a comment. They're always included in the beginning of your interview, some human moment of and this is before your question. I haven't had coffee yet, or my internet is out, or the dog is barking. Hang on, let me get the dog. Or I stepped on a Lego, or it happened all the time. And again, it just felt like, oh, you are trying to signal to Dylan you're a human in the world.
I honestly don't even think there's any intention on their part to signal that they're human. I think think it's just so totally. A phone call is just a window, right? If you were you started today asking me how my day was, I would have totally edited out I forgot my laundry detergent. Who fucking cares? I care because it was one of those small things that derailed my day. But I would have edited that out in an email to you and a text to you. Yeah. And so whereas a phone call, it's that's inescapable. The humanity is inescapable on the phone. You're well, I'm going to hear it all. And so that means if you need to get your dogs out of the room, that means if you need to find a different place in your house where the service is better, that means if you need to quiet your kid who is in another room, or tend to your kid, or your kid is on Zoom, there's just, you see a lot. And that's some of my favorite moments of this show is just seeing those flashes of humanity.
The liar episode, which is maybe your most heartbreaking episode, You Are a Liar. We certainly get that everybody processes differently, and that you shouldn't judge how someone, processes this unique experience. Can you set up Brian and Emma for us?
Yeah, so Benjamin and Emma. So Emma Silkowitz is a very public survivor of sexual assault who many people might know for carrying a mattress around Columbia University for every day that her accused assailant was still allowed to be on campus. And I worked very, very closely with Emma to make sure that, and when I do moderated episodes, this is a common thing that I will always leave it up to the participant in the conversation to determine what feels safest, who feels safest talking to. So after a good process or a lengthy process of kind of figuring out someone who fits that kind of tall order of being negative enough to be included on the podcast, but feels safe enough to speak to and emotionally safe enough to speak to, we ended up landing on Benjamin, who had written Emma just 4 words, "You are a liar." And this is a really devastatingly common thing that very public rape survivors get a lot, is disbelief of their story. I wanted to, host a call between the two of them where they talked about this stuff. And this proved to be a really challenging episode because a lot of episodes end with a kind of beautiful ribbon of, oh my God, I see things a little differently now. And it's really lovely to get to talk to you on the phone. And this is not necessarily what happened on this call. I think Benjamin felt still that he had some disbelief, and this is a complicated topic, but he was demanding forensic evidence. And he was saying he can't really, accuse anyone of anything without hard forensic evidence. And Emma was very patiently trying to explain that forensic evidence is actually an incredibly complicated thing in rape cases because there are so many hurdles to get over. There is whether or not law enforcement is going to take you seriously, how quickly people act, and how difficult it is to prove a sexual assault when society has kind of primed us to disbelieve women for the most part. And so Emma was very patiently trying to explain all of that, and Benjamin kind of wasn't having it.
You know, I'm an artist, and I've been an artist as long as I can remember. So when I'm sad or upset or angry, I just make an artwork about it. And there's so many people who, when they're sad or upset or angry, will make a song. Or other people who, when they're feeling some way, they'll write an essay. Or other people who will, I can't even think of any other creative things. Dance, they'll go out and dance. You know, they're just, everyone expresses themselves differently. And for me, when I was feeling these very, very, very strong feelings, I would make these performance art pieces. So does that kind of clarify that?
Yeah, so she reacted very performatively. She is a very famous art piece, Mattress at Columbia, and his big problem seemed to be with how she responded to the rape.
Yeah, and I think this is a really difficult thing, is that when you kind of go into the public square, which Emma goes into details explaining on the episode, was not her intention. She just thought she was truly doing what she believed to be a very quiet performance art piece, that because she was a performance artist at the time, so she was like, this is how I process things. This is how I'm going to do it. And whereas I think members of the public square, which is all of us, often feel like we're entitled to our opinions being heard on what we feel about this person and how we feel that they're processing this thing that happened to them. And there's like a judgment that comes from how rape survivors process their rape. And sometimes we're told that there's a correct way to do it and there's an incorrect way to do it. And since there was so much media attention, this was somehow incurred by Emma. And yeah, it was challenging.
And then, as you mentioned, sort of in that first phone call, it ends somewhat unresolved.
Are there any final things you want to say to each other? Parting words?
Well, sure, for both of you. Again, I appreciate this opportunity a lot. I would have never imagined that that message would allow me to get to actually speak to the person. And I know it may be hard to believe, maybe for Emma and the viewers or whatever, but I wish this person, Emma, all the best in life. Only the good things for you. We have a long life and a great life, and you as well, though. And again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. You too, Benjamin.
Thank you, Benjamin.
Emma, any final words?
Yeah, this has been, it's definitely really re-traumatizing to have to talk about all this stuff because, this is the kind of stuff I had to tell the school hearing committee. This is the kind of stuff I had to tell the police officers. This is the kind of stuff I had to tell so many people who wouldn't believe me. It's kind of just, it breaks my heart to do it again and to feel like the person on the other side can't believe me because I can't provide them with the science that they needed. I'm definitely going away from this conversation feeling like, a little, like I'll never have the kind of resolution I've wanted. And, it's always sad because it's like I never wanted to be raped in the first place. I never wanted to be here at all. So yeah, I'm coming away from this conversation a little heartbroken. And I guess I hope that this conversation ends up meaning something to someone someday.
So never mind sort of a public reaction to that episode. How did you walk away personally from that conversation?
So I definitely feel that I'm walking a very difficult ethical tightrope when I do this show because I am both making a space. I need to make sure that Emma feels safe and taken care of in this conversation. And at the same time, I also need to make sure that Benjamin feels safe and taken care of because he did not force his way onto this show. I invited him onto this show. He is my guest. So it can be really challenging to hold two people's expressions at the same time, even if I'm expressing my own agreement more with one party. I still need to make sure that Benjamin feels safe. And so the way this presented itself is, when I posted about the episode on Facebook, there were just a ton of people piling on against Benjamin. And I checked in with Benjamin because that can be a really difficult thing to experience, especially Benjamin had never done a podcast before, right? Like he was not used to like doing anything publicly on the internet. So when I started seeing those comments, I needed to check in with Benjamin to just be like, are you doing okay? Because even if I disagree with you, this is a psychologically really challenging thing to experience when people are saying really negative things to you.
Is that the experience then, that vitriol towards Ben, was that the impetus for your big idea, the sort of thesis of the rest of your, empathy? Go ahead,
empathy is not endorsement.
So empathy is not endorsement.
So that's a mantra that I kind of wrote down in the margins of my notes as I was like in the early days of making this podcast. And I think only a few episodes were out, was editing some others. And basically, I was walking that tightrope again of like, I really love my guests. And I also really profoundly disagree with them. And I also, or if I don't politically disagree with them, I feel really hurt by a thing they said. I see them as human. I really like them. I like talking to them. I'm empathizing with them. Am I permitting something? Am I giving them a permission slip? Am I giving other people a permission slip by empathizing with my guests? And, one day I just wrote down, just like empathy is not endorsement. And it was essentially like a little Post-it note that I would write to myself of like, I can keep going. I can keep doing this. I can keep empathizing with them. That does not mean I am endorsing every single thing they believe. I am not co-signing ideologies they hold that are completely analogous to mine. So that was just a thing I kept telling myself to get through the first season of the podcast. Empathy is not endorsement. I can keep doing this. And I mean, that mantra is like present in every single episode. Emma does like such an incredible job of balancing that on the call of like, of being deep of expressing hurt at Benjamin's message, and also being aware that Benjamin did not invent disbelief of rape survivors. It is too easily that we scapegoat one individual person for the sins of the system, and that we think that we're attacking the system by attacking one person, and I just don't think we are.
Ends on a bit of a cliffhanger and a little unresolved, but we have the benefit of your entire library, and so we know that that Ben does sort of have his come to Jesus moment in your sort of plan 2 acts moment of your podcast when, and this gets a little weird how like the sort of hate chain continues and you feature some hate that episode received in the form of my favorite character and maybe needs her own podcast, Kay,
my God,
the Canadian
wonderful.
farm girl
Wow,
who has the craziest sound bites ever. She identifies as pineapple and she's insane. And let's just hear a little bit from episode 17.
Well, retrospectively, I wish I'd been a little bit more thoughtful. I went back and listened to it, and I feel like maybe I was kind of entrenched at the time and like more defensive than I should have been. After listening to it, I kind of realized I got where what a lot of people were saying in the comments.
Oh, really?
Sort of how I came across, I think.
So you read some of the comments in reaction to the episode.
Right.
And what was that like for you reading the comments?
I'm pretty low key on all social media. So that's
smart
probably the only time I've ever had sort of explicit haters.
Yeah.
So that was that was a new experience.
A new experience.
I'm curious what, and maybe you covered it and I just missed it in an episode, but do you get a reaction from Emma to this episode?
I asked Emma basically for her blessing to do this. And that was the first. There were 3 components I needed to make this episode. Of course, Benjamin and Kay. And the comment that Kay had written is Kay said after listening to the episode that we just heard here, the clip we just heard with Benjamin and Emma. Kay said that she hoped that Benjamin was eaten alive by a pack of wild dogs. So I needed Benjamin's participation or interest or blessing. And I needed Kay's interest, but very first I needed essentially permission from Emma, because even though this conversation wasn't going to center on Emma's story, and I wanted to make it super clear that we were not going to rehash the things that we talked about in that earlier episode, invariably we are going to be referencing it, and it's going to be something that came out of it. So I needed to know that Emma felt comfortable with that. I think this fully encapsulates what I'm trying to say with this show, which is that change does not happen in the course of a phone call. We are spoiled by the 5-act structure to think that change happens in a really tidy space for listeners and viewers, and that is just not the case in reality. And so Benjamin he says in the interview that he had listened to it 5 or 6 times. And it wasn't necessarily the mob, although he was paying attention to the comments. It was more time. Benjamin says, he doesn't know how he kind of got himself into that position. He was like, how did I suddenly become the guy who was defending a potential rapist? I never wanted to be that person. And he just feels that he kind of got lost in it.
This is if there is a Dylan Marron sort of ethos, it's it's representation. It's get people in stories that represent all of us. It's every single word. This is what you do, man. This is it. And it traces back to your Kevin McAllister moment. What is tell your Kevin McAllister story?
Oh,
I think it's so important to understanding who you are and why you do this.
The research you have done is impeccable. Thank you for doing that.
I have a 10-month-old. I have nothing else to do. I just enjoy
listen,
it.
I just want to say it is such a pleasure to be on an interview like this. So the Kevin McAllister story is, for many people who are non-white, there is a moment when they realize that there is a construction of race in this world and that you are not in the dominant race. And for me, one of the biggest moments was at the cattle call open call audition for Home Alone 3. And it was also when I learned that Hollywood had a representation problem. But here's the story. I went to an open call audition for Home Alone 3 when I was in 3rd grade because they were recasting the role of Kevin McAllister. This is New York City. So there's a line around the block, and it is beautifully the united colors of Benetton, right? It's every race, every color, all sorts of kids vying for this role now that Macaulay Culkin had aged out. So this was being held in an auditorium in a school, and there were 7 chairs on the stage. So basically hundreds of kids in the auditorium with their families, and there were 7 chairs on the stage. So 7 kids would come up, casting assistants would go around the chairs, interview them, and one of 2 things would happen. Either they would send them through a door on the left side of the stage, which meant they were moving on to the next round, or they were sent back to their awaiting families in the audience, pack up their things, go. It's this is kind of how open call auditions go. There's a next step, and there's a thank you, you didn't even get past the first round. And so I was super confident at the time, and I was I am going to make it. This is going to be great. I'm so good. So I went up with all the confidence in the world. I stood up. One of the casting assistants took a few notes, jotted a few things down on a clipboard, and they didn't even really get into a conversation with me. They just sent me back to the auditorium. And it was only then that I noticed what was happening, and that they were sending only white kids through the door on the left side of the stage, and everyone else was being turned back right away. And this is one of those really tricky ways that Hollywood gets to get around this submit all ethnicities kind of thing. Is yes, they're allowing all ethnicities to be in the auditorium. And to have their shot at going through the door on the left side of the stage. But the truth is there was a filtration system set up right at the top, right? In the whole time that we were there was not a kid of color who was sent through that door.
It feels very much like in the comic book of your life. That is the best origin story. Sort of first couple pages is that experience, and then you flip through into every single word.
Yep.
And you see examples of it time and time again in your current podcast conversations. And I think that the comic ends with public office. I'm excited for you to run for something. I think you should. I don't know if you've thought about it, but you have my vote. You're so likable.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
But before you run for public office, we have one more game to play here on the Pod Spotter. Right now, you're a bottom shelf pod. You can be a top shelf pod if you answer
my God.
these next questions correctly. Yes, we're playing one more game.
I love it.
This is a little segment we call How Well Do You Know Your Pod? I'm going to ask you 3 questions, get 2 out of 3 correct, and you are a top shelf podcast, my friend.
Wow.
Question the first, what is Tori Amos's string theory? Brought to us by Amanda Palmer.
So the string theory that Amanda shared that she and Neil Gaiman talk about is that it was to illustrate the fact that we get most upset at the people who are most similar to us but a little off. And it's that when a piano is super out of tune, it doesn't bother you as much. But whereas when a piano is like a little out of tune, you notice it even more, like it hits your ear even stronger.
Let's have a listen.
We call it the piano string theory, which is a piano that's really out of tune actually doesn't sound as out of tune than a piano that's slightly out of tune. So 2 strings that are almost resonating with each other but not quite are going to sound more dissonant. And I was like, that's the thing. It's not the people who are far off in different cultures in different countries that you can't relate to. It's the woman who's standing right next to you at the same job, who is the same age, who is the same color, who, has the slightly better situation, who you despise, and who you use as this basis of comparison.
That's the best. I mean, that is the best.
I think it is the perfect description of it. Yeah.
It's so good for your pod in general. These people that are the people that, are throwing the hate out there. It's because you recognize something in yourself.
Oh, completely.
It's like you're right there in the same lane.
I think it also sums up infighting perfectly. It's like, we agree on 98% of things, and then I just hate the way you express this thing, so I'm going to take all the venom I have at the world and put it on you.
That's number 1. You're 1 for 1. Let's hear a little bit from Kay, my favorite. What would Kay have done to Ben had she seen him IRL?
Oh, I thought we were going to play the clip first.
I can't.
What would...
Kay.
I think it was punch him in the balls.
Ooh, let's see.
I don't... Okay, I'm not justifying this or excusing it. I'm just trying to be upfront. But, as like a little Irish Canadian hillbilly, when I first listened to the episode, I don't think I would have said anything at all. Benjamin, if you were there, I probably would have just punched you in the dick. It was just so
Punch Benjamin in the dick. Whoa, okay, we're going there.
Redneck style,
Redneck style, okay. Great.
I'm going to have to say punch in the balls is different than punch in the dick.
Oh my God,
sorry,
great.
Judges. You were just a little off there.
I understand.
Kay is out of her mind.
That is
Kay's response to Ben's episode with
a true icon.
Ben and Emma. True icon. One more opportunity to become a top shelf pod. You answer this question correctly. According to Matthew, in the calls coming from inside the house, it's not AI that will destroy us, but what?
Humans destroying humans?
Let's have a listen.
There's this idea that the computers are going to take over one day. They're going to overthrow society, and it's going to look like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where it's the sentient computer that has achieved primacy over man and is able to control them. Whereas possibly, maybe we would destroy ourselves if we choose to use technology for hatred, for dividing ourselves, for being mean to other people. And so I don't think that the androids are going to come and destroy us. Perhaps we might destroy ourselves if we don't figure out a way to use the internet and its technologies in a way that builds peace and builds bridges of understanding amongst ourselves.
Beautiful, Matthew.
Will you accept?
I accept 100%. 2 out of 3. You are a top shelf pod.
I would
And he
argue
came up
that
with
it's 3
theory.
out of 3, but
You're right. Disagree on anatomy issues there, but we are 2 out of 3. That is top shelf pod. Matthew.
Oh my God.
Summed up this. That's funny that episode was like one of your early ones also. And that's definitely an idea that we see again there in the social dilemma. We have to act now, or we're going to eat ourselves. So listen to conversations with people who hate me, and you will, feel the divisiveness slowly wash away. That's definitely been my experience. Of course, remember there is another person on the other side of that computer.
Yeah.
Dylan, it is the last 5 minutes of our podcast, and we have a little segment in the last 5 minutes. No one is here anymore. The commute is over. They're finished cooking. It is just you and I. And so if you wanted to recite poetry, sing a song, tell off a former lover or a boss, this is our time, basically. Our time. Here.
Love that. I love this section. I love this segment so much.
Okay. I'm going to go first.
Please.
And I think I should, talk about a detractor or a hater or a troll back in high school. I should tell the story of Luigi. I should tell the story of my soccer friend who would call me pigeon chest. And it was such a good insult. Because I didn't really even know did it mean I was puffed out? I didn't have a good enough chest, but we would regularly, shirts and skins, and he would just call, oh, come on, pigeon chest. He would call me pigeon chest, and I would turn flush red and just and he was like an older classman, and I never had a good response, and the other kids would laugh. And, I guess I just want to share it and recognize that now, after listening to your pod, that it was probably because we were in similar lanes, and he thought that I was an equal and could handle it, and I was equipped to handle it. He probably, much like your bully, saw me as a threat, or it was just, I don't know, tough love. I don't know. I don't know why I've carried it all these years. It's so funny.
So I also think, I think about my own bullies, and it's like, it's still also up to you if you want to forgive them or not. Like, there were some who are more hurtful than others, and, we can acknowledge that they're a human being. It doesn't mean you have to necessarily let them in. So I think about the people who did the most hurtful things to me, and I'm like, I totally accept that you're a human being and you're hurting, but I don't know that I want to form a friendship with you right now.
Yeah.
So actually, in the vein of detractors, I will tell you something. So it's one of the reasons I kind of value confidentiality, but this is also from high school. This is not from a student. This is from a teacher. So we had, in my junior year, they implemented anonymous student feedback for teachers, which I don't think I was the only one, but I remember I was one of the people who had suggested that they do this because I think would be valuable to give the students the power to, be able to express a feeling they had about a teacher to a teacher in an anonymous way. But it was my last day of class and we were doing student evaluations. And the way it would work is that the teacher would put an envelope on the desk that then would be sealed and then would be sent to the head of their department. So this teacher had the envelope sealed, and I was taking a lot of time to do this feedback because I was like, this is a very smart, very good teacher. But there is one thing that I wanted to point out, which is that sometimes they could be pretty condescending when kind of teaching a lesson. And I was aware that they were both such a good teacher and so smart. And I also wanted to genuinely give this feedback anonymously so that they could kind of take it in. And this person saw that I was taking a while with the comments, whereas most other students were not. And I gave away the gender, he knew something was up. And when I went to hand it in, he snatched it out of my hand. And he said, he read the whole thing. And then his face dropped. And in front of the whole class, he was like, so you think I'm condescending? And that to me was such a breach of a social agreement that had, it was also not that I was trying to hurt him. I was like, it is a thing where, like, if you're being asked to do something anonymously, that should be honored.
Maybe this is the first panel of your comic book. I might be wrong.
I mean,
this might be the origin story.
I definitely think Home Alone and this is like they fused, you know? It's like I felt duped into giving honest, constructive criticism and then was shamed for giving constructive criticism. And I think about that all the time, especially with the work I'm doing now, which is like, yeah.
It explains your demeanor when bringing if like your podcast was you. So let's listen to Ben. Ben said, it's not. It's you're like, I want to do everything that teacher
didn't do.
Mr. What was his name again? Sorry.
Can't say. Can't say. You're not going to get me on that.
Can you tell us the subject?
No. It would be so obvious to,
Smart. Yeah. Dylan, I love you. I love your pod. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for hanging out with me today.
I have to say, this was such a pleasure. You were such a wonderful interviewer. The fact that you and your team did so much prep, I cannot thank you enough for that.
I have 7 more episodes and 7 more questions to talk to you about, but it's been 2 hours and these people are going to kill me. But no one's listening because it's the last 5 minutes of our episode.
I love that.
I don't know if we're allowed to, but I'd love to play out with the music of your podcast because the song's been stuck in my head. Constantly, it's just playing
great.
on loop. It's
Caged
the
Animals.
best Caged Animals song. If we're allowed to do that, that's what you'll be hearing next. And if not, you'll just be hearing me say, go subscribe to Conversations with People Who Hate Me, wherever you get your podcast. And remember,
there's a human on the other side of the screen.
All day we sweat, but we forget when we go home. We learn to switch off all our...
This has been the Pod Spotter, where we showcase the pods that you need to know about. But if you have one that you think that we should know about, please let us know via thepodspotter.com or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram at thepodspotter, and we will get those hosts here for you. Thanks, everybody. This has been Zack Robodos. The Pod Spotter is created by the Price Brothers, produced by Oink Inc. Radio, associate producer Tori Adams, and is recorded and produced at Baker Sound in Philadelphia.